This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Amy, I think I've got my escape plan sussed out.
For leaving Illinois?
Yeah, right.
All right.
Of course.
Which route are you going to take?
Multi-million-dollar idea, too. You know, like in the share economy, I'm going to gather all of the middle-aged men like myself and set up a service modeled after the Japanese osans.
What is that, Osan?
Let me give you an example. Ken Sasaki and his violin are available to rent for about $9 an hour.
Oh.
Yeah. Wearing a shirt with a miniature panda bear print, similar to my fashion sense,
yes.
and smiling inscrutably, Ken Sasaki has the vibe that is anything but that of a disgruntled middle-aged Tokyo man. Urban citizens desperate to get advice from older, wiser persons, but don't want to turn to the guy they've worked with for years or the uncle who remembers the tears shed over a broken toy truck. Someone familiar might judge them. So they rent middle-aged men
For advice?
To teach them how to play the violin for nearly any purpose that does not involve physical contact. We keep it,
Right, let's keep it clean.
Keep it clean, keep it platonic. And Mr. Sasaki, in particular, wants to restore the honor to this vaunted profession of osans. Particularly concerning was an experience he had on a commuter train where high school girls were making fun of middle-aged men, calling them smelly and dirty. And,
How do you feel about that, Dan?
and talking about their hairy ears.
Whoa.
I, too,
Is this hitting home?
I, too, have suffered those slights.
I don't know if you have hairy ears because you have a headset on. But
That's why I wear a headset. I wear it outside the studio as well for that reason. But if he can restore the honor to osans and give meaning back to the lives of us broken down middle-aged men, then the least I can do is try and scale this model that the Japanese have provided us. Cultural exchange, if you will. What do you think?
It sounds like you just need to find friends.
Well, that couldn't
for somebody to be your friend.
That couldn't hurt. I'm being paid.
Oh.
Yeah. You're saying other people need to find friends rather than having to rent me. But it's not just friends, it's advice, it's insight. It's
counseling. It's stand-up counseling.
This is why we pay Jonah Goldberg $9 for every appearance, so we can get his advice and counsel, his wisdom and insight. Jonah Goldberg from National Review, author of the new book, Suicide of the West, How the Rebirth of Tribalism, Populism, Nationalism, and Identity Politics is Destroying American Democracy. Jonah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Do we have Jonah?
Jonah?
Oh,
yeah. I think I hear some.
He's trying to break
semblance
through.
Of a phone call. Jonah, do you need help?
Has he gone to the other side? He's trying to communicate to us from the great beyond. Okay, we've got
Jonah
phone issues, obviously, with him. So
we'll try and reconnect.
This is great. This gives me more time to talk about my business venture.
Wait, how much are you going to rent yourself out for?
Whatever the market,
I don't think
$9
is enough.
bears.
I think you should demand $15 an hour.
A
maybe
living
20.
wage. Yeah, a living wage.
Yes, you had to say it, huh?
So in Japan, this started because many middle-aged men who were sort of the managerial class, lost their jobs and had economic troubles in the late 80s when there was that economic downturn in the lost decade in Japan after Japan was going to take over the world in the 1980s. And so this class of freelance workers, mostly male freelance workers known as freeders in Japan, was born, and it's sort of morphed like Kiretsu is like that kind of business class. So now you've got the osans, and look now, though he started out slow, going back to Ken Sasaki to use him as a real world example. He has roughly 45 rentals a day, 10,000 encounters per year.
Well, he's a busy man.
Yeah.
Must be giving some sound advice there or lessons.
We probably have one or two middle-aged men in our audience who would like to be rented out. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro tax line. For any job under the sun that you can do, any advice and counsel you can provide, excluding physical contact. So no Fred Garvin male prostitute jokes here. Talking about legitimate,
Well, what do you have to? I mean,
middle-aged wisdom.
you can talk about Illinois politics. You can talk about corrupt pensions.
Mm-hmm.
They could rent you to talk about poetry, economics. You can bring Hayek along.
Yeah, you get the dog. That's a kicker. That's probably another $3 an hour.
Oh yeah, just
Hayek.
go for 20 or $17.99. Use promo code Dan and get it for $16.99.
All right, let's get Jonah Goldberg back in this conversation. Jonah Goldberg, from National Review columnist and the author of the book Suicide of the West. Jonah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
I don't know if you missed our conversation, but we're talking about renting out middle-aged men, these Osans in Japan.
I did miss this.
Yeah.
My imagination might run wild with it, but I don't know the context.
I know you always go right to the gutter, so I'm going to tell you it excludes physical contact. No Fred Garvin.
No ifs, ands, and buts about it. You're spending the night with Fred Garvin, male prostitute.
Yeah. So it would be to rent middle-aged men for their wisdom, for advice and counsel, Jonah, like the way that we rent you every so often for your advice and counsel.
That's literally my job description.
You're already doing
Wisdom for hire.
You're already doing it. All right, great. Let me ask you a question about the political landscape as you see it. Nate Silver in the New York Times, Nate Cohn in the New York Times, I think it was, had a piece about the yawning gender gap that is projected, at least at present, for the November midterms. We may see that play out in Ohio, in central Ohio today. We may not, but this becomes a sort of problem the Republican Party's always had, but it may be metastasizing for the Republicans under Trump.
That looks basically right to me. There was some data I was looking at the other day that, Steve Bannon, who you may or may not recall, I do not have a very high opinion of.
Yes.
But he basically conceded that college-educated Republican white women is basically an extinct species now because of Trump. And Phil Bump at the Washington Post thought this was hyperbole, and then looked at the data. And if you run through the data that he surveys, it's kind of true. And I think this is one of the problems that we've gotten into. It is absolutely true that Trump has brought in valuable and important new members to the Republican coalition. Getting the white working class has been a goal of a lot of Republicans since Nixon, and he got a lot of those people. But he didn't. But at the same time, he sacrificed big chunks of what is actually the real Republican base, which are college-educated, middle and upper middle class married couples with kids. That has always been sort of the suburbanite Republicans have really, in many ways, been the heart and soul of the GOP, and the GOP is just losing lots of them, particularly among women. And so it makes, everyone has to be a little more skeptical and a little more humble about making predictions based on polls given the last few years. At the same time, all of this stuff about Trump going around on the stump, it absolutely will help in very, Trumpy districts in western Pennsylvania and the like, but Trump actually hurts in more purplish districts where Republicans need to get some independents and soft Republicans and the women vote. And so I think right now, if I had to bet, I would say, I don't know if we'll call it a blue wave. Is 25 seats a blue wave? Probably not, but it is enough to take back Congress. And I would be, at this point, a little more than a little shocked that the Democrats didn't take back the House.
Speaking of hurting themselves, President Trump, CNN had reported this morning, has been told by his advisors to stop tweeting about the Donald Trump Jr. meeting at Trump Tower. What do you make of all this activity over the weekend, and then Donald Trump Jr. calling it last night a bait and switch?
Look, it's funny. I mean, one of the reasons why I think this whole thing is funny right now is that last night on Fox, I made some throwaway joke about how Rudy Giuliani must sit chain-smoking cigarettes, white-knuckling it out, waiting for Trump to tweet again about this stuff. And in real time, Giuliani, who apparently doesn't have anything better to do, said, some moron on Fox just said I smoke cigarettes. I hate them. I only smoke premium cigars, and you should, if you're a lawyer, you should get a refund from your law school. I mean, it was just like,
Oh my God.
dude, try decaf.
Yeah.
That's not a normal reaction.
And so, look, it just, they're not particularly right now. They're one of the things that's confusing is that Donald Trump Jr. really does need a legal strategy. Mm-hmm. It sounds like he may have lied to Congress about the nature of this meeting, and he did it under oath. And if that's true, he's got a real legal problem. Donald Trump Sr. doesn't need a legal strategy right now because everyone basically agrees the sitting president can't be indicted. And what he needs is a public relations strategy. And oddly, he's picked Rudy and some other people who I don't think are very good at this to muddy the waters as much as possible. And so the tweeting about this, I think, does, there's a lot of people getting their dresses over the head about, oh my gosh, he just admitted it. He confessed to collusion.
Yes.
He did kind of confess to collusion. The problem is that's not a confession to a crime because collusion is not a crime. Everyone wants the fact that collusion is just this weird word we have that actually doesn't have a corresponding legal definition in the criminal law cuts both ways. I think that meeting was collusion by the Trump campaign and the Russians. I don't think you can defend it against the charge of collusion. Was it a criminal conspiracy? I don't know. That remames to be seen.
Just opposition research. Why is it collusion?
Well, right. I mean, the problem is that Trump has already agreed. I mean, a year ago, the selective amnesia of the press corps, and as you were taught, David Frum is a good example of what you're describing in the Atlantic. He confessed. He tried to sway the 2016 election. Oh, imagine a candidate trying to sway an election to his favor. But Trump tweeted out in July. Byron York has it at the Washington Examiner. In July, on 13th, a press conference with Macron in Paris. 4 days later, he tweeted out again. Most politicians would have gone to a meeting like the one Don Jr. attended in order to get info on an opponent. That's politics. So what's the news?
No, again, the news is not, I don't think, what David, I haven't seen David's piece, but the news has more to do with the fact that, and I did read Byron's thing, and I think Byron is absolutely right in how he reports it, but he does leave out the fact that for over a year, they've muddied the waters. The story about what this meeting was about has changed dramatically. There have been any number of lies from the president's lawyers, from the president's press spokesperson, and for Trump to say it this declaratively and clearly basically makes a lot of the other chaff and smoke and mirrors nonsense that some of his defenders have been throwing up non-operative. We now know that this meeting was for a meeting with an emissary from the Russian government. They were told that the highest levels of the Russian government were going to provide dirt on an opponent, and the entire senior leadership of the campaign took the meeting for that purpose. And that just means the available excuses and distractions and explanations to the PR team has shrunk dramatically. So I agree, it's not really legal news, but it is news in the sense that the number of rhetorical options left to the White House are less. And I think one of the reasons why the legal team is worried is that, and Judge Napolitano was making this case last night on Fox, if Trump goes ahead and tweets again and says that he knew about the meeting in advance, that opens up a whole new wicket of legal things that could be really problematic for the president himself. I mean, look, I have not met a lawyer, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, who says away from a television camera that they think these tweets help Donald Trump in anything like a legal sense.
Right. No question. I mean, the thing that's so frustrating for me is there's just never an explanation for anything. So, and maybe this is purposeful. Maybe this is part of Trump's communication genius, according to Scott Adams and others. that he talks in sentence fragments, excuse me. And so it's left for everybody to interpret. And then there's a sentence fragment a few weeks later that could be interpreted as consistent with the previous sentence fragment or in contradiction to it. And it just spins round and round and round.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, a lot of his stuff, if you read transcripts of his answers, they read like, translations of ancient scrolls with lots of text missing. And it's open to a lot of different interpretation. And I agree with you, it's extremely frustrating because there's always sort of a safe harbor for the most damning interpretation, but also the most, exonerating interpretation. And just getting a straight answer about the facts would be really nice, one way or the other.
Going to the other side this weekend, the big Daily Cause Netroots convention, and all the Democrat socialists were there. Your colleague, Rich Lowry, the editor over at National Review, had a piece last week in the Post about, like it or not, we're debating socialism in America. And what you heard at Netroots from Ocasio-Cortez and Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and the rest is embracing. Daily Kos was on Meet the Press on Sunday. Embrace the label. Let's debate it. Should conservatives and Republicans be spoiling for that debate?
Sure. I get kind of frustrated because I was writing about this in the early days of the Obama administration.
Yeah.
Is that liberals love to say we believe in socialism, we believe in social democracy, which is a variant of socialism, and then the second conservatives take the bait and say, so you're a socialist. They're like, how dare you, sir? How dare you? And they want to be able to use. It's like these racist tweets by this woman Zhang at the New York Times. They want to be able to use the words as they want to use them, and then claim that they're being falsely accused if you take them at face value to criticize them. And so I remember when Barack Obama came in, all of these liberals, mainstream journalists and liberal alike, were talking about how Donald Trump represented finally the arrival of socialism in America. The front page of Newsweek back when that was still a thing was "We're all socialists now."
Right.
And I remember Matt Iglesias talking about this as an opportunity for massive socialism and all these kinds of things. And I wrote a piece taking it seriously, and for commentary, a big long piece, and everyone was, just mocked the hell out of me for how dare you suggest that Barack Obama is a socialist. Oh, wait a second. All you guys have been calling him a socialist, and I say take you seriously, and then you call me a fool for taking you seriously. And this kind of thing, I think, is something that we're all going to have to work through. I don't think the problem the Democrats have or the left has is that they don't know what socialism is. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez doesn't know what socialism is. She thinks socialism is the word for the government doing all the nice things she wants it to do. And if they want to actually have a debate about socialism and distinguish between, you listen to Bernie Sanders, and he sounds like a drunk tour guide at an Epcot Center exhibit about Denmark in the 1950s. He doesn't know what socialism is. And when you ask these people what is socialism, they basically just say, I believe in a country where every child is taken care of and no one goes bankrupt for health, paying for health care and all these kinds of things. That's not a program. That's a freaking Hallmark card.
But the danger they have, the problem they have is, people the problem some in the Democrat Party have, and you mentioned Matt Iglesias. You got a piece in Vox last week. Centrist Democrats are out of ideas. They want this. And people like Deval Patrick, who's out making all his money at Bain Capital right now, trying to resuscitate his political career, they have to go along. Yay, Medicare for all, this and that, and beyond the entire program. To me, it seems like this is the real opportunity for Republicans to stave off, a midterm correction or even a wave, is to amplify what the base of the left is suggesting.
I tend to agree, and under normal times, I think that would be exactly the sort of Karl Rovian kind of strategy. The really weird thing about our politics right now is that the whole concept of the political center, which sort of defined politics as I understood it and as my parents understood it for almost a century, seems to have vanished before our eyes. Majorities of Americans think the Democratic Party is too extreme, and majorities of Americans think the Republican Party is too extreme. I think a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump is doing is actually stuff that a more normal Republican president would do, but all people who don't like him here are the tweets and the constant sort of, occupying of their headspace. So the Republican Party seems much more extreme than it normally would, in part because the press, wants to put a camera on every schmuck with a swastika on his arm and say it's the Republican Party. And meanwhile, the Democrats, they've lost, Barack Obama basically, eliminated the entire sort of moderate Democrat tradition in the Democratic Party. They're just all gone. And so there's no talk about moving to the center. There's no talk, and I'm not saying I'm not a centrist, right? But this whole the normal way you triangulate against an extremist is by saying the normal people in the middle plus my side is a winning coalition, and there is no effort to win the people in the middle from either side. And it makes our politics really, really, really weird in ways I don't think anybody has experienced maybe since the 1930s.
He is Jonah Goldberg, National Review columnist. The book, Suicide of the West, you want to pick up. Jonah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro